Hello, it's Caitlin, and today I'm going to be talking about all the books that I read in June. Surprisingly, I read 9 books this month, so I could say I pretty much capitalized on my productivity and actually did it for once. The first book that I read is A Confectioner's Tale by Laura Madeline. This book follows 2 separate storylines, one in the past and one in the present, that eventually connect. The one in the present is a mystery, kind of like tracing back what happened in the past, and then you're like catching up to it in the past, but it takes place in Paris in the past. This is not working out well, but in England in the present. In the past, we follow Guy, who is navigating moving to Paris with one of his friends and working for a railroad line, but then becoming kind of infatuated with this bakery and the girl who works at that bakery, and kind of being sucked into the world of baking. So this book has a lot to do with baking, which is pretty much one of the reasons that I wanted to read it. But in the present, there's a girl named Petra. There's a girl named Petra, and she's a student, and she's trying to work on her thesis while also trying to defend her grandfather's name, who happens to be involved in the past story, and she's kind of like getting caught up between the two. I really thought this was an enjoyable book, but it wasn't something that blew me away. It's one of those stories that it made me feel really happy while I was reading it, and it had a really nice atmosphere and a good vibe, but the writing was pretty basic. I was definitely more invested in the past storyline than the present storyline, and I kind of felt that like some aspects of the present storyline were kind of unnecessary, like the entire plot of her thesis thing didn't really need to happen, could have been left out. So even though it was kind of like unfocused at points, I thought that it was a really nice story, wrapped up really nicely. So if you want something with like a really nice, happy ending that's gonna make you feel a little bit wholesome inside, this is a good one. I think I gave it 3 stars. Next, I read The Unbecoming Amara Dyer, which is something that I just kind of really felt like reading. It was just kind of calling to me on my bookshelf, and I had no idea what it was about, so maybe that's why. This is something that was hyped up a long time ago, and so the hype has kind of like died down. So that's why I was really surprised by how much I liked it. It's really, really hard to kind of give a genre to this book or say what it's about. It's contemporary, it's kind of paranormal, it's kind of supernatural, it's kind of sci-fi, but like the genre seems to change as each book progresses. But it follows a girl named Amara Dyer who's dealing with some trauma and rediscovering her life, but she's kind of dealing with like hallucinations. But are the hallucinations actually hallucinations? I don't know. I didn't even say hallucinations correctly just now. This first book I thought was really fast-paced, really enjoyable. It took me only a couple of days to read, and I think I gave it 4 stars. So obviously I then read the evolution of Amara Dyer. I really enjoyed the second novel in the series. I thought it was even better than the first one. It kind of like took everything up a level. The stakes increased. The kind of terror slash thriller horror level felt a little bit more intense as well. I get scared pretty easily, so it works on me. So for me, the second book, amazing, incredible, loved it, gave it 5 stars. It also felt very focused on the characters, which I enjoyed a lot. So then I read The Retribution of Amara Dyer to finish the trilogy, and I enjoyed it. I read it very quickly, also in like 2 days. This whole series is just really, really quick to read, and I liked it, but not as much as the other ones. I kind of felt that the entire vibe of the book was different. It definitely changed the genre as a whole of the entire trilogy, which is cool, and I liked it, but it didn't have the same energy as the other 2. There are also like kind of an unnecessary amount of pop culture references to like Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, other things that I haven't read or seen or anything, so it kind of made some parts a little incomprehensible because it's less of the characters being the characters and more of the characters relating to other characters, if that makes any sense. I don't know. I mean, it was funny at times, but also it can be a little bit too much too. So because of that, I gave the last book 3 stars. But as a whole, I think this trilogy is really fun, and for anybody who hasn't read it, I'd say it's a good one. Next, I listened to the audiobook of Brief Answers to the Big Questions by Stephen Hawking. This was my first exposure to reading anything by Stephen Hawking. I have watched a bunch of movies about him, as many people have, and think he's a very interesting and cool person and has lived an extraordinary life. So this book was really interesting. It's basically just Stephen Hawking taking on some of the big questions that he has explored throughout his life, philosophically, scientifically. There were certain questions that were mainly philosophical and others that actually drew more upon his research. For the most part, I really, really enjoyed this, yet there were some parts that kind of went a little bit over my head. Maybe if I had been reading it in a physical copy, I would have been able to pay attention a little bit more closely and had been slightly more focused. But I might have fallen asleep maybe once while I was listening to this audiobook. But I don't think that's the book's fault. I think that's my fault for for zoning out during the audiobook. However, it was really good. It was really entertaining to read. I also really liked that between the chapters there were portions of like interviews with Stephen Hawking that actually included him kind of addressing that question of the chapter a little bit more succinctly. I also listened to the audiobook for God Help the Child by Toni Morrison. This was my first Toni Morrison novel. I know it's definitely not one of her more well-known novels, but she has quite a few novels. It was read by Toni Morrison herself, so that seemed like a pretty cool prospect to me. They also have a couple more audiobooks at my library by her that are also read by her, so maybe I'll read those at some point as well. God Help the Child follows Bride, who is a Black woman who has been kind of taught mentally by her mother from a young age to regard her very dark skin as something that society is unprepared for or finds unattractive. And she kind of takes it for herself and transforms her identity to be a beauty based around her skin. But the main theme of the novel is actually talking about the impressions made on children and how those kind of carry through life and result in later actions or choices. There's also a certain magical realism aspect to this book that I absolutely didn't expect. I guess I shouldn't really go into it because it's part of the surprise of the book, I guess, but I found that really interesting, really enjoyable. It was probably something that added a lot of depth to the book for me. Next, I read 3 Story, The Secret History of the Giant Man by Matt Kint, I think. This is a graphic novel about a giant man who just continues to grow and grow and grow throughout his life, and it follows 3 different perspectives: his mother, the other being his wife, and the third being his daughter. It basically shows his progression and how he's forced to leave people behind over the course of his life. The art style to me is really beautiful. I don't know, it's very pleasing, very kind to the eyes. So I enjoyed that quite a bit. I thought it was a nice read all around. I think I gave it 3 stars. Next, I read Dumplin by Julie Murphy. This is something I've been wanting to read for a long time, ever since I went to a panel at the North Texas Teen Book Festival where Julie Murphy was at. And it was a talk about body positivity, creating representation for people of different shapes and sizes and different skin colors and everything the like. So I've been very excited to read this, and it definitely held up to the hype. I loved this book so much, probably one of my favorite things that I read this month. It's about Willadine Dixon, a self-proclaimed fat girl who works at a burger restaurant in her small town, and her mother runs the pageant for this town in Texas, by the way, which was really cool, an aspect that I really enjoyed about this book. There were quite a few references to little details about Texas that were surprisingly accurate and kind of added a good amount of character to the book. As someone who lives in Texas, I like that a lot. So Willadine Dixon, the main character, back to the very scattered plot synopsis, decides to enter this pageant as kind of a little minor, tiny little revolution against her mom, but not only her mom, but about the town and the ingrained stereotypes that the town has around this pageant. It's a journey dealing with self-esteem, body positivity, and I think what I liked about it is that it's not someone who is completely confident in her own skin. She is dealing with her insecurities, and yet she's standing up against the opinions of others at the same time. And I think this book does a really good job of addressing insecurity. I love the message. I love the writing style. I would definitely read other books by Julie Murphy, and I'm excited to do so. Finally, I listened to an audiobook of Letter to My Daughter by Maya Angelou. I've read a poetry collection, I think several poetry collections by Maya Angelou in the past, and they've all been really amazing. I've loved her style. I've loved the themes that she discussed, and so I wanted to read something more about her life. So I took on Letter to My Daughter, which is not actually a letter to her daughter, seeing as Maya Angelou did not have a daughter. It begins by saying that she's talking to all women, all females, anyone who she could address to as a daughter, to pass on this wisdom and this knowledge of her life. I really enjoyed it. I think it was a little bit scattered and had very different times in her life, also very different approaches and style. That wasn't just talking about her life, it was also intermixed with some verse and with some short pieces of advice. It was a great mix of style. And overall, I think it was really good, and I gave it 3 stars because, yes, it was also read by my Angelo. Big plus. So those are all the books that I read in June. I'm hoping I can even match a sliver of that productivity in July, which, who knows, that's probably hopeful thinking, but I'll do my best. That's all for this video. I'll see you soon.